Ranking member yields back. I yield myself time for a closing statement. First of all, to the witnesses, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. One of the things as we go through this conversation and these hearings about the national grid and the energy components of the grid, we must realize that the electric grid has transformed dramatically over the last several decades. Coal obviously used to be the dominant portion of our energy grid. That is no longer the case. The massive shift to natural gas in our energy grid has actually led to massive decreases in greenhouse gases being emitted from electricity generation. That's how we've been able to lower our carbon emissions in the United States over the last 15 years. Currently, U.S. electricity grid by source is 43.1% natural gas, 18.6% nuclear, 16.2% coal, 10.2% wind, 5.7% hydropower, 3.9% solar, 2.3% other. The electric grid is shifting all the time, and where we have to get focused in the United States is making sure that the most efficient and readily available abilities to power the grid so that consumers can get readily available power at cheap costs is the priority, not climate change. As we have heard here today, our nation's power grid is facing a serious reliability crisis. Grid planners anticipate that power demand is expected to rise while power generation is expected to simultaneously decrease at an alarming rate. How are we expected to make up for this disparity when the Biden administration continues to demonize our most reliable sources? Federal regulations and renewable subsidies are distorting our resource mix in ways that will make our electricity less reliable and less affordable to consumers everywhere, regardless their politics, regardless their income levels. Rules such as the EPA's rule on power plants, which have been wisely scaled back, would still directly impact the amount of additional capacity able to come online in the coming years. Electric vehicle mandates and other initiatives that would radically increase electricity demand would create additional strain on the system while further increasing our dependence on China for critical minerals. Essentially, if we go to more renewable energy, we're going to need more batteries. If we use more batteries, the critical minerals for batteries are not mined in the United States. They are mined by the People's Republic of China. And we will be relying on China to expand and maintain our electric grid. I don't know about you, but that's not very smart. Simply put, the Biden administration's never-ending quest for green at all cost policies is making America's electric grid less stable. Even NERC's 2023 ERO Reliability Risk Priorities Report named the changing resource mix as the #1 threat to electric reliability. Congress has a responsibility to oversee the massive federal initiatives straining the system and impacting the reliability and resiliency of our grid. Americans rightfully expect electricity to be flowing even when external factors such as severe weather events create strain on these systems. And while unforeseen risks to the electric grid are certainly a cause for concern, there are steps we can take to mitigate as many of the known liabilities as possible. This includes ensuring policies and procedures do not add unnecessary stress to our existing power capacity. Just as so many sectors depend on bulk electrical systems to function, the grid itself relies on an intricate resource supply chain to operate effectively. Delays in the permitting process of everything from natural gas pipelines to transmission lines add unnecessary uncertainty and costs to utilities and ultimately costs to the consumers. As we look to build out the bulk electric system in time to meet growing demand, I urge my colleagues in Congress and the White House to recognize the limitations of a renewables-only agenda and implement policies that will safeguard, not jeopardize, Americans' access to power. I thank all our witnesses for being here today and for sharing their insights on these issues. In closing, I want to thank our panelists for today's testimony. With that, and without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit materials and to submit additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their response. If there is no further business, without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.